Landlords, why do some of you keep making this crucial mistake? And what am I talking about? I'm talking about renting your unit to the wrong tenant because you didn't do a thorough background check and fully vet the tenant. I don't know how many times I've gotten a phone call in the last few months. I just got one yesterday of a landlord that rented her unit, of a landlord that rented their unit to the wrong tenant and now is calling me desperate for help. Guys, it's going to be 2025. You can't be a casual landlord any longer in this environment. You know, back when I started landlording in 2001 or 2002, it was so simple to rent to a tenant, and if they messed up, you could evict them easily. Those days are over. Everything is about litigation and working against landlords in this environment. Our politicians have created an environment where tenants get free legal help, and the landlord has to pay their legal bills. There's tenants' rights attorneys all over the place looking for tenants to sue landlords. Once you have a tenant in your unit, you're married to them until they voluntarily leave. You can't get them out unless they don't pay rent or destroy the place or doing something illegal or ethical or bothering the other tenants. But it's so hard to get somebody out. You really got to vet them fully to make sure they are worthy of being a tenant in your building. Not doing this can cost you thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars, lost rent, headaches, nightmares, just stress to the max because you picked the wrong tenant. So in this day and age, what you have to do is fully investigate the background, do a background check on these tenants. Dennis Block has been talking about this for a long time, about how he fully vets a tenant. So let me tell you about the story, though, that I got from a landlord. And the reason she called me is because the tenant she rented to had rented from one of my clients a while back. And evidently, this landlord did not call any of this tenant's past landlords to inquire whether or not this was a good tenant to rent to. Now, I mean, I don't know why she didn't make any phone calls. And here's the other thing. There's no handshake deals. There should be never any verbal agreements. Everything has to be in writing. So this person was renting this to this tenant for only a month to 3 months, but the landlord said they had a verbal agreement that either could cancel verbally between 1 and 3 months. So in other words, the landlord could say, hey, I want my unit back, or the tenant could say, hey, I'm going to leave in 2 weeks, and no problem. So of course, and she didn't have a job. She was getting a job. She was going to get a job. She had something was coming up. I don't know exactly what it was. So verbal agreement, and this person didn't have a job. Now, she tracked me down because she realized that this tenant had rented from one of my clients. And somehow she tracked it down, saw my name as a realtor attached to the property, and called me and said, hey, you don't know me, but do you know this tenant? Their name is blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah. And she asked me about the tenant, and I said, well, you didn't do a background check, did you? She goes, no, I didn't do it. And then she told me she did this. Then she told me she did this handshake deal with this tenant. I said, you're stuck with her. The good news for this landlord was that the tenant's at least paying market rent. I mean, thank God for that. But she wants the unit back. I'm not 100% sure why. I said, you're stuck with her. I mean, I can send you to a landlord to see what, I mean, I can send you to an attorney that I know that can help. But I said, you're stuck with this person. And this person, this tenant is very litigious. If you look this tenant up and you Google their name, there's lawsuits. And what does Dennis Block say? He says, never rent to a tenant that has been involved in a lawsuit, either as the plaintiff or the defendant, whatever. It doesn't matter if that tenant has been sued or has sued anyone for any reason. Do not rent to them because they're most likely litigious. So this landlord client of mine, well, not a client, this landlord that called me is just, she's just freaked out over this whole situation. So that spurred me to record this video and tell you, landlords, stop doing stuff like this. I went to Dennis Block's website at evict123.com, and by the way, Dennis has a AI chat bot where you can put in questions. So here's what I put in Dennis Block's AI chat bot. I wrote, is it legal? No, I'm sorry. I put in how to run a legal background check on a potential tenant. And this is what they said. First of all, you have to use the right rental application form. I recommend using Dennis's application form. And they have to give you written consent to do a background check and run their credit. Then you have to use a reputable screening service that complies with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. These services can provide credit reports, criminal history, and eviction records. Very, very important. I will put a link to a couple of screening services. Of course, the AOA and AGLA have those as well. So make sure you use those. Then you got to check public records. You can conduct a civil litigation search through the Superior Court website in your county to check for any past lawsuits involving the applicant. You can Google the applicant's name, and you'll usually get lawsuits. If they have lawsuits that are involved, then they will pop up. Or you can go to the LA Superior Court and run a civil search with the tenant's name to see if anything comes up. Verify employment and income. You got to contact the applicant's employer to verify their employment status and income, ensuring that they can afford rent. That's what this landlord didn't do. She didn't verify any employment. She just took the tenant's word that she was getting some job somewhere at some time. Got to speak with previous landlords and personal references to get a sense of the applicant's rental history and character. Very, very important. Obviously, you got to review the credit report. The credit report will give you insight into the applicant's financial responsibility, including their credit score and outstanding debts. Remember to comply with all applicable laws, including anti-discrimination laws, and ensure that your screening process is consistent for all applicants. There's things that you can and cannot ask, and I'm not going to go into those right now, but make sure you go over to Dennis Block's website at Evict123. I keep telling you this. This is one of the most important landlord resources for people in Los Angeles or California. Very, very important. Evict123.com. He has free forms, lease agreements, rental applications, and all kinds of good stuff. Now, I also asked the chatbot if it's generally legal to ask a potential tenant if they've been convicted of a felony. And it said yes, but there's important guidelines and restrictions to consider. Landlords can only consider convictions that have a direct and specific negative bearing on a substantial, legitimate, and non-discriminatory interest or purpose of the housing provider, such as the safety of other residents on the property. So I'm guessing that if the potential tenant was convicted of pedophilia or rape or something like that, I'm guessing that would be grounds for not wanting him around your other tenants or her around your other tenants. Um, I would imagine that if they were convicted of a felony for maybe a white collar crime or something, that doesn't really affect other tenants. So um, this is a guideline. And by the way, this is not legal advice. I'm just repeating what Dennis Block's website says and common sense. So obviously consult your own legal counsel for any decisions you're going to make. Now, prohibited inquiries. Landlords are prohibited from considering certain types of criminal history, including arrests that did not lead to a conviction, participation in diversion programs, sealed convictions, or juvenile convictions. So I guess you can't say, have you ever been accused of a crime or arrested of a crime? And if they've never been convicted for it, that's a prohibited inquiry, according to the chatbot on Dennis Block's website. Individual assessment. Landlords must assess each applicant individually and cannot have blanket bans on all applicants with criminal histories. They should consider the nature and severity of the conviction and the time that has passed since the conviction. I guess that's open to interpretation. Opportunity to provide mitigating information. Applicants should be given the opportunity to provide additional information that may mitigate the relevance of the conviction. So it's important to ensure your screening process complies with all applicable laws, including fair housing, and apply the same criteria to all applicants. So if you have more questions, I'm sure you can call up Dennis Block's office and ask for more information on background checks and asking about convictions and felonies and stuff like that. So, and the other thing is, guys, do not do favors for your tenants, your existing tenants or applicants to your building. Do not do any favors. I know so many stories of landlords that let a friend move in because the person was going through a divorce and they lost their job. They didn't have a lot of money. They didn't have a place to stay. They had to get away from their spouse. And the landlord says, well, you've been my friend for 20 years. I tell you what, I have a vacancy. You can move into my unit. No problem. I'll only charge you like half the monthly rent. Just when you got to go, I'm going to tell you and say you got to go. Okay. I'm not going to get a deposit. I'm not going to run your credit. I don't need an application from you. Just give me first month's rent. I'm gonna make it like half of the regular rent, and then when you get back on your feet, you can go. What happens? That tenant turns into the tenant from hell. And what do I mean by that? I had a client years ago that had this same issue, and she did somebody a favor, put this person into her unit, and she turned this landlord, the tenant turned into the tenant from hell. She wanted to sell the building. She needed the tenant out. The tenant said no, became very belligerent, moved a dog in, moved a new boyfriend in. It was just a big pain in the ass. You know that saying, no good deed goes unpunished. Oh my God, that is so true, especially in landlording. Guys, we have to be more professional. We have to follow guidelines to run a building properly in today's climate in Los Angeles, in this liberal, progressive, woke hellhole we call LA, where the politicians are coddling tenants and they hate landlords for some reason, us housing providers. So please be vigilant when it comes to vetting potential units. This one tenant that this landlord called me on over the weekend got a huge settlement from their last landlord, more than $100,000. So some of these tenants, they know how to work the system. They have attorneys on speed dial. They're just looking for suckers that don't know how to vet tenants and how to run their building. So please, can you guys do a better job of doing background checks and vetting your tenants, avoiding problems? Make sure you talk to their last couple landlords and talk to their employers and ask for personal references. It's not 2000. It's 2025. We're in a different environment. It's tough enough with inflation running our buildings and going through COVID restrictions and all that. So now that we're back to semi-normal, please do a better job of running your property. Get on Dennis's website. Use his forums. It's a great resource. And let's stay out of trouble. Thanks for watching, guys. This is Derek Ruiz. Always here to help if you need anything. You know how to get a hold of me.